right, founders, welcome back. We are here for part 3 of branding and bottom line. We're here with Ryan Townend from William Joseph in Calgary, Alberta. And this episode, as always, championed by our really great friends over at Community Future Sunrise. Thank you for all that you do. Okay, branding. We have covered some really important topics when it comes to brand. Now we're going to talk about how we weave this brand in to not only the company and the team and the culture, but how we weave it into our products and our services. And then we're going to touch on price point, which obviously we need to dovetail it with brand. So where do we start with this? Do you actually recommend different exercises for each product and service that we sell? How do we weave brand into the products and services now?
Oh, it's a big topic for sure. So
I'm not asking you to brand the states, so it's okay.
That's very kind of you. Let's just think about Apple for a second. So when we think of Apple, everything like Apple tries to make your life simple, right? There's just a simplicity. So you can do things on their phones, you go into their stores, like it's simple. The design and brand aesthetic of Apple is embedded in everything from the experience to the product to you can see it, like you see white out of the corner of your eye, you kind of know you're in that store. The packaging, like everything is very consistent. And the reason why people do things to make them consistent is so that it's more memorable. It's easy to remember so that when they see that, they know exactly where that's coming from, right? So I think the thing is your whole idea is trying to standardize and create consistency that's in alignment with your brand. And you think about for example, the fleet of trucks that are going out to sites. Well, there's a branded element, the experience should be consistent, right? So if we're problem solvers, we're all problem solvers, but the trucks all show up deckled, the people are in the appropriate gear, the brand is prevalent. And I think the thing is, it's not old trucks, it's newer trucks that are properly deckled and clean. Yes. Because you think about that, it's that attention to detail. So if you say that you're an attention to detail type of company, and I drive into your yard and all the trucks are haphazardly parked versus that company where all the trucks in their fleet are perfectly lined up, that tells a different story. And I think that's the thing is we as consumers are always picking up nonverbal cues. So I made the comment, practice what you preach. If you came into William Joseph and the office wasn't what you expected, you might be like, what, are they legit? Or then you see this place and you're like, oh no, this matches the story that I thought they were putting out. So I think the thing is from your products and services, everything has to be at that level of consistency that your brand promises. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And can I throw in an example here? Because I love that example that you gave with trucking and Apple. And I think of 2 guys that I know that have a construction business, and they kind of settled on, they didn't settle, they put a lot of effort into it, but they decided to go with Cleverness. Cleverness is what set them apart in the building process and the renovation process. And from their early marketing days where they decided, okay, if clever is our promise and our brand position, their marketing had to be clever. So they started delivering earplugs and parking pylons to, neighbors of where homes were being renovated. But then even in the build process and all of the proposals that they wrote out, they made sure to extrapolate. Here are some of our clever ideas, right? We're going to suggest this under the stairs. We're going to suggest this in the cabinets. We're going to suggest this in the backyard. And so it was just always first and foremost in the eyes of the consumer, but it reverberated throughout the entire
experience.
I don't want to say entire what?
The whole experience was
the whole
consistent.
Experience, yeah, from start to finish. So products and services, I guess you would sit down and you would go through that same exercise. How do we infuse it? Where can we inject it into the touch points, and then get your team all on board with that? So I imagine that would be a fairly simple process. The hardest process is figuring out what you stand for.
Yeah, and I think what it is really, it's all about is it's embedding those values into your culture. So people just think with that filter. Okay. So it's not always it's just that it feels like it's just that intuitive filter that we have. So when somebody sets up coffee in the kitchen, they have that because of our culture, they think that way. So they just automatically do it that way. And that's the power of culture, right? I think as companies grow, like we talk about branding and why it's so important for external audiences like a customer. Branding is more important for internal audiences like your staff. They have to drink the Kool-Aid. They have to be proud of the company they work for, and they have to operate in the consistent manner that the brand is set. That's what culture is all about, is to help form that sense of behavior based on the corporate standard that's been set. And when you have that in alignment, that's when magic happens. So companies that are growing really fast have challenges with this because they're onboarding. People aren't learning the culture. They don't know those values. So like, and they might not have a formal HR or culture manager. So sometimes that's where we at William Joseph have to really step in and say, wait, we need to create an internal communication strategy. We need to focus on internal communications to help educate people inside your company what that means. Because again, it's about the experience. We can put out the shiny ads, but if we don't live it, it falls flat, no results. So
you bring up such an important point, because I remember when I was working with a large organization, it was a large telco. And to your point, it was a battleship that not everybody, sure, we understood the visual representation of the brand, but we didn't understand the internal culture because it was just too big. I think we were like 50,000 employees, right? And not everybody could resonate with that brand. And so what I love about what you've just said is that this becomes one of our competitive advantages, is that when we can nail our brand, then we have like arms and legs above like what the competitors can do, because we can just put that out there really quickly, and we can live it and act on it really quickly and fix it if we need to really quickly. We're very nimble and agile that way. So brilliant. Thank you for bringing that up. I think that I never even thought about that competitive advantage piece before. Okay, brand and price. This is where I think a lot of companies go off the rails because they're incongruent with what they say they are. And then they put a price out there. Oftentimes that price is usually discounted because they're so desperate for sales. What can you tell us about brand and price and how we need to make sure those two are aligned?
Oh, like that's another $1 million question. So I think the thing is, it's all about consistency, right? And so people will pay a certain price based on the value they receive. In the lack of value, they won't pay. So they'll think you're too expensive. So if somebody leaves you on price, you did not do a good enough job to demonstrate value. Now, let me also be clear. You also have to be lean and efficient. So if something is, let's say the going rate for something is $100 and I have a premium brand, I could maybe sell it for 120 because I have elevated the experience. I'm going to give you more support. I'm going to give you X, Y, Z. Here's all the things that take that product from 100 to 120. I can demonstrate that to you. And if you want that experience, you'll pay more. Done. If you want to go with a very economical solution and just get the bare minimum service, X, Y, Z, and pay 100, that's fine. What I find sometimes happens is people are, there's no strategy behind it, right? So what happens is they're trying to still offer this big service, but then they try to fight the pricing war. And then once you start this pricing war, you can't pull it back up because, you know, even if like during COVID, we've had clients that have had to quote unquote, like sharpen their pencil because of just the competitiveness. But that gives you the opportunity to say, well, for this year, we're going to give you a discount, but if you sign a long-term deal, because we're a long-term partner, like there's just ways to language and message things so that you don't turn it into a pricing war. And like I said, once you get down, you can't get back up.
Right. Yeah, you've set that bar now, right? You set an expectation. Well, I think that's extremely important. I also, you know, speaking to that point about incongruency, I think that there are some companies out there. I always use the example of the dollar store versus the Holt Renfrew, but there are companies out there that do want to be the dollar store, and there is a purpose that those dollar stores do serve. But to your point, they have a strategy around, this is the perception that we have in the market. This is the price point that goes with that perception. So you can get plenty, you can get it cheap, you can get it fast, but you'll be coming back to get it a lot more often because it's not going to last a terribly long time, right?
Yeah. And you know what, like I would give you an example, like William Joseph is a lot like Mercedes. Okay. So a lot of the stuff we sell is really high end and it comes with a high end price, but honestly, we still sell smart cars. So if you want to get into the game, we can definitely help you out with a little smart car, and then you're going to trade that smart car up for a C-Class, and soon you're going to be jetting around in that convertible when you work with us. But the whole point is that you're going to get quality at each step, but we do have entry points, and we don't make any excuses about that. We're very confident in what we do. And my whole thing is this is my value system. I never want somebody to walk away from WJ feeling I can't help them. That's a feeling I would not be okay with. That's why we did free classes. We do workshops. So from free to $2,500 to $40,000 to $1 million, like we have something for somebody at each point. And if all you come to us for is a free class, that's fantastic. I hope you have an amazing experience. I'll still treat you like you're the biggest customer in the room, because I don't know who you know. And that's where the word of mouth and goodwill and reputation goes. So we live in a small world. Everybody is connected now. So like, I think it's so important that you treat everybody as a potential customer, whether they have no dollars or $1 million, because you just don't know who they know, right? So that's my philosophy in life.
So important. And I think we had a pro in here the other day that was talking about pricing, and there was this conversation around splintering. So instead of discounting, just starting to break out some of your bigger services and being able to offer it and still exceeding that expectation and bringing people in along the way. But so important there. And I love what it is that you're referring to, because I know a lot of people out there, specifically founders, are heavily discounting and want to be everything for everyone. But I love how you've just bundled that, because there's a way that you can still do that without compromising your brand and the perception of your brand. I love that smart car analogy. I think that's brilliant, because you're brilliant. So talking about money and pricing, can we just quickly touch on, and not necessarily quickly, but can we touch on budget? And budgeting for branding, because as you mentioned earlier, importance and urgency, and with everything that's been going on, I'm sure a lot of people are like, branding and the investment in brand, and what's the ROI going to be on that? What are your thoughts on budgeting for brand?
I love this question. So I'll get a new client that comes to us and I'll say, like, what's your marketing budget? 95% of the time, we don't have one. What should it be? I'm like, okay. And they'll ask a second question. What do you think is expensive? Because expensive is such a relevant term, right? So there's two mindsets. Some people will think of branding and marketing as a pure cost. Other people will see it as an investment with an ROI. Now, people that have tried marketing and it's never worked will see it as a cost, and I don't blame them. It's never worked. I put it out there, I lose money, it doesn't happen. Others have seen it work, and then they've seen the magic of it, right? So we always sit back and go, like, who do you want to be when you grow up? So if you say to me, Ryan, we want to be a global company and we're taking on these competitors and we need to acquire this much business in 6 months, that's a very different budget than if you want to grow your business by 5% in the city of Prince Albert, right? That's very different. So I always tell people, like, marketing isn't cheap or expensive. It's all relevant to how hard you pump that gas in your car. So if you want to go far and fast, it's going to cost way more than if you just want to grow slow and like steady and slow. Mm-hmm. So that's where we use something called objective-driven marketing and budgeting. So if you tell me you want this to happen, I will tell you how much it's going to cost to make that happen. So a marketing plan could be $10,000. A marketing plan could be $1 million. Now, I need to tell you a little story. So many years ago, my team came to me and said, we thought we needed a brochure because to tell people, who we are and stuff. And my team came back, the strategy team, and said, we don't want to do a brochure. We want to do a magazine because we think a magazine would have a longer shelf life and people would keep it, right? Versus tossing a brochure away. So that makes it really neat. And they said, no one else is doing this in our industry. So it's authentically us, it's differentiating, and it's going to make a statement. And I said, well, how much would a brochure have cost? And they told me, and I said, how much would this magazine cost? And it was 10 times more, 10 times. But they said, we want to actually do it twice a year, not once a year, 20 times more. Okay. So think of something like $3,000 to $60,000. Like, I'm not talking 3,000 to 4,000, 3,000 to 60. And they said, but this is going to set us out amongst the crowd. So of course I trust my team. If I get clients to trust my team, I need to trust them. So I did it. Now, everything in marketing is still a calculated risk because all the strategies in the world still can't guarantee, but we had pretty definitively thought this out and we did it. Our sales after we launched that magazine went up by millions.
Wow.
Not hundreds,
Wow.
not thousands. Okay. So if I told you the ROI on that magazine now, you would be like,
Wow.
give me 2 of them, right? That's a no-brainer.
Yes.
But to go in trusting the strategy, trusting it, and see, that's the thing. The cost-conscious person would have said, I am not spending that money on 2 magazines. I want the brochure. And their business would have hardly grew. The investment-minded folk would say, okay, if that's what it's going to take to get my business to the next level, let's do it. And we did it. And we saw that huge gain, huge. And so that's the moral of the story here, right? You still have to have a really dynamic brand and activate it in a really smart way to get the gains. But if you want to play, there's some risk involved, right? And the bigger the risk, the bigger the reward. But if you play it safe, don't be surprised if you actually see very little results, because this world is so complex and there's so many people playing it smart that they're taking the business. So if you're just trotting along, it's not the way to go, and I don't know. That's a good story.
No, that's an amazing story. And I'm sitting with it and so many thoughts come to mind. It feels like how we started off this episode where you're talking about mindset. And there are a lot of founders out there right now, especially in the middle of the pandemic, that have been hit financially. They've been hit hard. Do you think there's, this is going to be a loaded question, sorry. But I'm curious, because what you did is you basically went running off the cliff, right? You're like, let's just go for it. And you didn't have a parachute. And luckily the plane came by and you soared. Is there a way, like when we're shifting a mindset, and I get the playing safe, might there be a step that founders can take, especially because I would imagine that they would be working with someone to help them with branding and to help them with marketing? Is there a step that they might be able to take to ensure that they're in the right hands, establishing trust, building that rapport, building trust with that consultant, with your company, and then once that trust is built, then they take the flying leap? I don't know what I'm really asking there. I'm just wondering if there's a way to go from 0 to 100 without having to step on the gas, but to do this incremental growth.
So think of this, like when you are on a plane on a tarmac, we know we have a runway with a limited space and we need to fly. But when the pilot pulls it back, it goes slow at the beginning and it goes slow. And there is a point where they could shut the mission down, but there is that critical point where we're in too deep. We're going. We're going to take off. And every founder knows that feeling of there is no plan B. We're in the air. I just don't like skimming along the roof lines. I'm the kind of guy that likes to be a little bit more like, okay, they got to Mars, let's keep going. So my theory is there is no plan B. I am going to do this and we're going to pull this back. And if I do something stupid, I'll quickly correct course and keep going, right? But I think the thing is marketing it's easy for me to talk like this because this is what I'm trained in. I have 20 years experience. So people truly just need to find an agency or a consultant that they trust that can take them there, that shares a mindset, right? And it's going to take a few sleepless nights. Like it is, like you're gonna be like, did I put my money in the right spot? I have payroll, I have electricity, I have like R&D, now there's this marketing. But you could have the best company in the world, and if nobody knows about it, you have no sales. So let's pull this back. Marketing is not the lowest priority. It's equal at the table as every other aspect of your company. And if you don't make it a priority as important, it will finally break down, and then you're going to have a bigger problem because you're going to have backed up inventory, a terrible culture, no awareness in the market. Like all these things will happen if you neglect that.
Yeah. Ryan, I want to leave it right there, because I'm still, to be honest with you, my mind is still in that when you painted that picture of that plane and that runway, and when you're on the throttle, there's a point where you have to take off. You don't have any option. That to me, that was sitting with me. I think it's probably sitting with a lot of founders, because I was like, okay, that's it, ready to go. So where I want to leave it now is for everybody listening and watching. Ryan's his contact information is in the show notes. The link to the university is in the show notes. So whether you're that smart car or you're the Mercedes, there's something there for you. So just get this done, because it is so critical. It is not meant to be on the back burner, and don't try piecing it together, because that becomes your brand. Piecing it together, right? And clients don't want people that are piecing it together. They want to know that you've got this, that you're solid. So Ryan, thank you so much. So much information in there, so valuable. I'm going to have to watch this a couple of times for it to sit in, but I'm ready to take off. So literally and figuratively, I guess. I'm talking about
I always tell, I close a lot of my LinkedIn posts as of late with this line, and I think it's fitting for this episode as well. Now is the time.
Oh, yes. Yes, it is. I just want to sit with that for a moment. It is so the time. This is it. So thank you, Ryan, for being here. Thank you, Community Future Sunrise, for all that you do and for inspiring and educating founders, community futures across the country, and Community Future Sunrise for all that you do in Southeast Saskatchewan. Thank you, ladies. Ryan, thank you as always. It's so good to see you. Thank you for being here, and let's stay in touch. Now is the time.
Now is the time.
All right. Bye, everybody.